Sure. I aim to please.
Yeah, a little easier.
So we are going to talk about something kind of interesting on this episode of Two Cents, which is value. And I think value, we were kind of talking just before we started this, and then we decided to sort of stop talking about it because obviously the whole idea is to talk about this on camera or on mic. There's kind of like two different versions of value, right?
Yeah. So monetary value, something that has monetary value, and something that has emotional value or memories or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, so, what's valuable to me may not necessarily be valuable to you.
Right.
Now, if we're talking about $100, it's worth $100 to both of us, but even money can have different values. If I'm a millionaire, $100 doesn't mean as much to me as if I only make, $10,000 a year.
And it also means something different if you know how to utilize that money in a different way. If your money's your $100 going to sit somewhere and, you don't do anything with it versus I may buy something else that's worth more than $100 and resell and resell. And,
Oh, yeah.
$100 can mean something different than $100 even in that way.
Yeah. That brings up what you said brings up something. It unlocked a memory for me. Did you ever see the, this goes back many, many years. Did you ever see the One Red Paperclip website?
I don't think I saw the website, but I think I have an idea of what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, for those of you that may not have ever seen it or heard about it, the One Red Paperclip idea was there was a person that had one red paperclip and they traded that one red paperclip for something else. And their goal ultimately was to trade essentially a red paperclip for a house. And they did it.
Yeah. It was like a paperclip to like a pen to like, something. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so that was the thing. They kept making moderate increases in value, right? So they would do the red paperclip, like you said, I think it went for a pen. And then the pen was like, well, okay, I can trade the pen for a bottle of water. And then the bottle of water got traded for something else.
Sure.
And it was and they ended up trading it for now it was a fixer-upper. It wasn't like, a Taj Mahal house.
Hey, but who can say that I traded a paperclip for a house? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the thing. It's like, just imagine that we've reached some sort of midpoint, like a laptop computer, right? Well, maybe a laptop computer means something to me. And maybe, you have, I don't know, a broken dishwasher, right? So, but if I have the skills to repair that broken dishwasher might be more valuable to me than say the laptop I have. So we trade and, right. So even though I'm getting higher value than what I had. So it's really that concept of value. Now you did something interesting. You went back and we can talk about, and this sort of dovetails into inflation too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
We talked a little bit about, you started doing some research into what things cost. How far back did you go?
The 30s was as far back as I went.
Okay.
1930s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So give us some examples of what things cost, say in the 1930s and then versus.
Okay, but so I also went and looked at the CPI inflation calculator, which tells you, back in the day, $1 back then is worth what today for buying power.
Okay.
So I gave the monetary value back in the day compared to what it is today. So like in the 1930s, let's see. So coffee cost an average of 39 cents per pound in 1930, which is equivalent to $7.32 today. So not far off. I mean, I haven't bought a pound of coffee recently, but I can't imagine that's far off from what is the average size? What is the average unit of measure of coffee these days? Like when you go into the store and you don't know Folgers or something like that. I buy the biggest can I can get. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but I mean, that has to be something like 16 ounce. Maybe that's a pound to 2 pounds of coffee, something like that. So here was, another one this one kind of threw me off. So milk back in 1930 was 56 cents, which is equivalent to $10.51 today.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, per gallon. And that was one that fluctuated over the years, because then you started getting into delivered milk, and that cost more versus something you get.
Oh, sure, yeah, the milkman.
Yeah, so
I'm just a kid, by the way. No, that was an old. I mean, for those of you that are under the age of 30, but yeah, the milkman. You're right. I guess that's probably true of stuff today too. Like if I want to have something sent by one of the delivery services that are out there, Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever it is, it's going to cost me more.
Yeah.
And than if I go get it myself. You're paying that premium to have something
It's like
for the convenience.
Yeah.
Right. So the milk. So I guess you do have to take that into consideration. But still, if somebody had to spend $10 a gallon on milk today, they'd be pretty upset.
Yeah.
I would think.
And I don't know if there were other factors like agricultural factors, if cows were sick during the 30s more often, or there was less milk production, or
I mean, I know that there are some price controls put on milk now.
Oh yeah,
through the government source, so that might have something to do with it. But we, when we talk about inflation, and over the last like 2-3 years, we've talked about inflation a lot in the news and so forth. And this idea that, prices are, and they are going up. There's no denying that things are more expensive now than they were 3 years ago.
Sure.
But when you start comparing things like this, you start thinking to yourself, actually, maybe in all things being equal, it's actually cheaper than it might have been, say, in 1930s.
We're not far off for a lot of these things, yeah.
Give us another example. What do we got?
Let's skip ahead some years.
Sure, yeah.
Why not?
I mean, go into the 40s then. Let's go 10 more years.
Okay. So minimum wage in the 40s was 30 to 40 cents.
30 to 40 cents an hour.
I actually don't have the equivalent.
That's
for
pretty
that
great.
one.
So penny candy was actually like a good amount of your salary.
Yeah. Coffee back then, 10 years later, was 21 cents per pound.
Okay.
So, around half of the cost, because that was equivalent to $4.79 in today's value.
So that's probably a little closer to what.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Now here
Again, who buys coffee in the pound right now? So
yeah, right. Everybody just goes to Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks or something. I know we only have one Dunkin' Donuts in our town, and it is just a line around the block every single morning. I think to myself, these people are literally getting up a half an hour earlier than they need to just so they can sit in line at Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, and spend a ridiculous amount of money on coffee.
Yeah. Dunkin' Donuts obviously not our sponsor. So we have this idea of value being what something costs, and I think that that's a purely or a perfectly valid definition of value. The equipment that we use here in our studio and so forth is a certain value. There's a certain dollar amount attached to all of this, and while you can certainly do a podcast with less expensive equipment, sometimes in order to achieve the look you want or the sound quality you want or whatever, then you upgrade and you find more value in things. But then, so let's talk a little bit, and we might kind of circle back to this, but let's talk a little bit about the other definition of value.
Okay.
So, the things that I have in my house, my family photos. I think you said family photos, right? So family photos to me are incredibly valuable. And I'm sure your family photos are incredibly valuable to you. Your family photos are not particularly valuable to me, right? I mean, as much as I like you, if I don't know your aunts, your uncles, your extended family. So the photos that you have that you remember from your childhood, family vacations, things like that, they hold more value to you than to me, right?
Yeah.
So
I'll tell my, famous uncle that you don't want a picture of him, Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so what else? So that also got me thinking about, okay, what are some things that we as a society value today that maybe we wouldn't value as much in the past, or vice versa?
Okay. So we did find some of those.
Okay.
One of those was lobster. Back in the day, lobster was plentiful and was considered trash food. They would feed it to prisoners and slaves and young children, and but that today lobster is a delicacy that people pay high dollar for.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who obviously does not like lobster.
Okay.
And he calls it sea bug. He's like,
and
they kind of do look like that. I mean, they're
there's a comedian that's got a couple jokes about that. Yeah, it's our excuse to eat lots of butter. Is lobster.
Does he call it sea bug?
Sea scorpion. Yeah.
So
or sea cockroach. Yeah, I think there's a couple names for it.
yeah. So essentially, my friend is ripping off some comedian, and passing it off as his own. But that's fine.
Oh, yeah.
That's we've all done it from time to time. You also had on here. What else did you all? Oh, you
We
had
had diamonds on here too.
yeah.
Yeah. So back in the day, De Beers actually is the company that increased the value of diamonds. They had great marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they started off prior to 1800. Diamonds were extremely rare, and then a mine with, I don't know, what does it say? A trove of diamonds, as it doesn't even say, but was uncovered, which would have decreased the value because now supply is higher.
Oh,
And-
sure. Yeah.
and-
Yeah. Gotcha. Just like anything else. Right. Demand. Right.
So De Beers bought that mine, and they would strategically put out for sale
Mm-hmm.
a specific number of diamonds per year to still keep that want higher than the supply.
Yeah. Today, kids, that's called a monopoly.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to do that, or at least you shouldn't be allowed to do that. No, yeah, it's funny because obviously diamond wedding rings and engagement rings became a huge thing. I mean, there was a time when engagement rings were either family heirlooms, that it was your grandmother's or your mother's or what have you, and it got passed down, and so that was where the value came in, right?
Sure.
Because you were sharing something that was important to your family with this new person and bringing them into your family. And then eventually it was like, well, it doesn't matter about grandma's old ring because I want the diamond princess cut something or other, right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, the same thing happened actually in a lot of, I mean, we could use weddings for this entire episode if we really wanted to, but do you know where white wedding dresses came from?
I do not.
So up until the time of Queen Victoria, a wedding dress was just your best dress.
Okay.
Right. It was just whatever your best dress was or whatever you could put together. Maybe you got a special one, your mom made you one or something like that. But when Queen Victoria got married, everybody was looking at the royal wedding and she wore this beautiful white wedding gown. And from that point forward, wedding gowns were this white, beautiful affair.
Okay.
And then a bunch of other meanings started getting assigned to the whole purity thing and so forth. But it was Queen Victoria. Before that, white wedding gowns it wasn't a thing.
De Beers did something similar to that too. When they started getting a little bit more popular, they started putting their diamonds on celebrities. So everyone wanted to be like their famous or their favorite celebrity and have the same diamonds that they had, or same thing.
Yeah.
You see one famous person in something that you like, and then you want it.
And that has not changed either. That has really not changed either. There's a reason why there's a 2-hour television, I don't want to even call it a program, but there's 2 hours before any major like Grammy event, Oscar event, whatever, of people just walking in front of a camera wearing different things. And then the next day there are all these knockoffs and things like that happen. You know. I was trying to think of some of the other things that maybe had value when I was younger and no longer do. And, sort of the opposite of what we were just kind of talking about. And, you and I are both tech geeks. I think that people that watch and or listen to this know that both of us are kind of like, a little bit geeky.
Yeah.
And, but computers.
Definitely.
Computers are like, in 1980 something, an Apple IIe computer went for, I think you actually looked up how much some of this stuff was.
Equivalent to like $7,000 today. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that computer today, what would you pay for it?
Oh, $2,000 maybe.
Well, no, I mean, really, what would you pay for? Well, that's okay. So that's another thing. Yeah.
For brand. It depends on the brand too.
Yeah. Well, it also depends on the historical value now, because now you're starting to get into things where people collect these old computers.
Oh, okay. So you're asking what I would pay for a computer.
Yeah. What would you pay for an Apple IIe now? Like if you were to use it? See, that's the thing. If you were going to use that computer.
I was going to say, because again, it's got value to me because I am a geek, but if someone else would buy it, it would be worthless, right?
Right. So what would my mom pay for an Apple IIe?
Probably nothing.
Right. Exactly. And even though it was $7,000 40 years ago.
Right. And I probably wouldn't pay a whole heck of a lot either because I would get so mad at how slow it was. I wouldn't want to use it. Right. So you would just be paying for this, like the nostalgia. Someone that was born in I wasn't born in the 80s. So someone that was born in the 80s that grew up on that computer may pay a little bit more, but to me, it's worthless because I never had anything to do with that computer.
Yeah. I mean, that's, old vintage vintage video games are coming back to a certain degree, but only like the emulate, like you can play the game, right? But those games that maybe cost, $40, $50, $60 to buy in 1980s money, which is probably whatever it is, now you can buy the entire catalog and play them for essentially nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the value's in the ability to experience your past and experience your childhood, not so much in the actual playing of the or purchasing the game.
Nostalgia. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think the concept of value, especially when you're talking about money and banking and things like that, you have to really think about those kinds of things. Like, one of the things that I saw recently, there's despite being a geek, I also still watch sports from time to time, and there's a pitcher that for the Pittsburgh Pirates that is nationally known right now because he's easily statistically probably the best pitcher in sports right now. His name's Paul Skeens. His rookie card was recently found in a pack of baseball cards, right? And I think it went at auction for like $1.1 million for a baseball card.
And it's like Pokemon cards right now too. Same thing.
So, really? Pokemon? Like,
oh my gosh. There's like famous, I think Logan Paul was actually has like the most valuable Charizard. It's worth like several $1 million for a Pokemon card. Wears it around his neck on a chain. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure Pokemon was still that. I know they did that whole Pokemon, like, what was that? What was the one that was huge for like 20 minutes back in like 2019? Was it Pokemon Go?
Oh, the game.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Huge.
Oh yeah.
Like, I mean, like everybody was doing it, and then, but I realized the cards and stuff were still popular. And stuff.
Cards are, yeah. It's more so, but again, it's that generation like my age that they're in their 30s or early 40s, and they want what they had back whenever they were kids again. And back at that time, it was Pokemon cards.
Yeah. Well, and I think you just touched on something that's important, because I think when people think about value and they start talking about things, they start thinking to themselves like, oh, I'm going to collect this, or I'm going to have that, like collections, things like that, stamp collections, coin collections. And there's a lot of people that mistake age for value.
Yeah.
Just because something's old
doesn't make it an antique or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because somebody has to want it.
Right.
Like there has to be some reason for you to collect it or to keep it.
Right.
So just because I have an old piece of furniture doesn't necessarily make it valuable. But if I have an old piece of furniture made by a particular manufacturer or in a particular type of a particular style or something like that, or even if it was just owned by somebody else, if it was, there's a rare bookseller that I follow on online, and he had a book that was I can't remember what it was. It was something about world maps or something like that. It was it wasn't, but it was owned by Alexander Hamilton. Oh, so the book is worth like $1 million.
Oh yeah.
But if you had a copy that was not owned by Alexander Hamilton, it would be worth $35 or something like that. It's so. I think it's important too when you're talking about money, because obviously this podcast is ultimately about banking, about finance, about money, right? When you got to keep that kind of stuff in mind. That value changes. That's just like wedding dresses or rings or literal costs of things. Value changes over time, and so what you think might be valuable today may or may not necessarily be valuable 30 years from now.
Oh yeah.
Do you collect anything?
No, I'm not. I used to collect. I was big into fossils and stuff like that. Yeah, so I had a nice display case of fossils and dinosaur bones and
around here, surprisingly, there's a lot of fossils.
Oh yeah,
collect
a lot of like seashells and stuff like that, brachiopods and stuff. Yeah,
that's cool. What's a brachiopod?
A little creature that doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's, I used to, I started down the road, when I was a little kid. I started down the road of like coin collecting.
Okay.
Mostly because my dad collected coins.
Yeah, sure.
But it's just really hard to truly identify unless you're willing to send that coin away to have it appraised or evaluated, and then they seal it like in plastic and give it a grade and all that kind of stuff. Although I guess you could argue they do the same with
cards and stuff like that. I used to look for error coins. I was big into trying to find error coins, double dies and stuff like that.
Did you ever find anything good?
No, it was more, again, it was valuable to me because I thought it was cool, but nothing that was, nothing that it would be worth my while to spend my time to take somewhere or send somewhere to,
I think there's, there are probably apps and stuff now that theoretically will, look at things and scan them and tell you whether they're valuable or not as far as like quality. Quality of coin or whatever. Whenever I was in high school, there was a card game called Magic the Gathering.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they still make them.
They do.
But I got into it I had like alpha and beta cards because I had like original packs. Mm-hmm. If I still had them today, they would be worth a lot of money.
Oh, sure.
Because because people want those original cards.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
I had first edition Pokemon cards. I can't find them for the life of me right now, and I'm kicking myself in the butt.
I guess this all goes back to that same. There's that story of like, oh, I had a bunch of original blah blah blah.
Yeah,
my mom threw them out.
Yeah.
But sometimes the value also arrives in the scarcity, right? So something that might have been super super popular, but for whatever reason, they didn't survive.
Yeah. I might cut this out because it just sounds weird, but back when Aunt Jemima was taken off and it was Pearl Milling or whatever.
Oh yeah, Pearl Milling Company. Yeah.
Before when they said that they were getting rid of Aunt Jemima, I bought a whole bunch of bottles of Aunt Jemima and I still have them in hopes that it goes up in value, and it has over the years.
I would say I bet it has.
Yeah,
I really bet it has, and it's not because of any other reason other than the fact that this is something that a lot of people would remember,
right?
And have an odd emotional attachment to, I would have to say.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like you're going to eat the, maple syrup 40 years down the road, but you remember that label, you remember I don't know.
No, I think that's actually, I think a lot of things that you look back on now and, there are entire TV shows devoted to this. I mean, Antiques Roadshow, PBS, or Pawn Stars on the History Channel, is all devoted to this idea of trying to determine value of things that are brought to them. And it's amazing to me sometimes how many people bring things in and they are so, you can tell they're all puffed up and they're all like, they know what they got. They got something awesome here, and meanwhile, the person at the Antiques Roadshow looks at them and says, well, I got like 75 of these back here. Yeah. Like everybody collected them. And so they're not really that valuable because there's a billion of them left. So yeah, I think, but it's weird things like, like old branding, like old advertising signs, things like that. So the idea that you collected that, is not odd. I mean, that's actually probably a really smart thing to look at because, there's a lot of people that love, putting stuff like that on display in their homes and stuff after.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Especially if they're big into like cooking or food or something like that.
Yeah.
What all did you find as far as like some of the, so what about things like that are more, I don't want to say lasting because anything can theoretically last, but what about something like big purchases like homes? Like, did you find anything on like house prices or car prices, like things like that as far as value?
Cars were pretty in line with what they were like now and even, before the pandemic and stuff like that. The equivalent for cars, let me see, like that would have been, so in the 40s, a car would be around $16,000 a new car.
Okay.
Between 16, it was big. It was like between $16,000 and $30,000. That's a huge.
Well, there's a huge range even now. I mean,
right, there is. So, there is.
If I'm buying a Prius or I'm buying a Escalade, they're probably very different.
That's true.
The cost.
That's true. In the 70s, a car was roughly $33,000 in today's value. So houses in the 70s, $143,000 in today's value versus in the 30s.
Well, I was 143. What decade did you say?
That was in the 70s.
So 100, and that's 143,000 today's value.
Yeah.
So look at that. I mean, we just talked about that a couple of episodes ago about the average cost of a house in the U.S. is like $400,000.
Yeah, but that's increased significantly in the last just several years. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at, I got way too many papers in front of me. So 2000 to 2009, average home in today's value, 225,000. And then a decade later, it jumped up to 265,000.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Well, so I guess that's the thing too, is like, just like any, I think the reason that I was asking about homes and cars is because I think that they sort of bridge the gap between the two concepts we've been talking about.
yeah,
Milk costs whatever it costs,
Yeah.
right? But it's an expendable thing. You buy it, you either drink it or you don't, and then you buy it again. On the other side, family photos are either incredibly valuable or not valuable at all.
yeah,
But it's based purely on emotion. Homes, cars, things like that, they kind of fall in both camps, right? Because like, if I own like my first house,
Mhm.
like you're always going to love like your first love, your first house, your first car, right?
Yeah.
Like my first car when I was 16 years old, I bought so I was 16 years old. I would have been like mid 1990s. I bought a 1977 Caprice Classic from an elderly lady who like drove it to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
Right? It was a faux a faux fabric top. It was blue. The seats were beat up. I mean, it was objectively not a great car. I loved that car because
Right.
it was my
Right.
car, right?
and you paid for it. I mean, it meant something because you had to work for it.
right.
Right.
So there again, it kind of bridges that. You got a foot in both camps.
Right.
It's like objectively, that car does have a monetary value, right? I mean, it's not worth zero, but it's not. It probably wasn't worth what I thought it was worth.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think the same could be said of like your first house or something like that. Like you have a lot of your memories tied up in that. Maybe your parents' house.
Yeah. Right.
Things like that. So
I think doing the research threw me off because we had in a previous episode we had talked about the Sears catalog house being $18,000, and it's like, wow, you can't buy a house for
for $18,000 now.
but $18,000 back then was substantial. It was the $150,000 $200,000 of what it is today.
Yeah, and you were putting it together yourself,
Right. And you were stuck with how it came.
Yeah,
there was no customization.
very little. That's true. So I think the lesson from this, as we kind of wrap this up, because we're it's just supposed to be a 2 cents, I suppose, is just this idea that look, when you're looking at something, when you're looking to buy something, especially if you're looking to invest in something, whatever it is,
Mhm.
if you think consider the fact that, first of all, especially things like collections, things like that, that whatever it is that you're collecting may be valuable to you. It may be valuable to a lot of people today,
Mhm.
but it may not necessarily be valuable to a lot of people 50 years from now when you think it's going to be valuable enough to have accrued some sort of like, I don't know, perceived value that you're going to sell this thing that you bought for $20 today for $200,000
Yeah.
in 50 years.
If you can find a trend, from the past to see how it's gone up in value or down in value, fluctuated, look at that. Consider that too.
Yeah, if you can.
If you can, yeah.
Things like furniture and homes and stuff, you might be able to do that. Things like LeBron James rookie cards, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, think about that. So, I mean, I would argue I was surprised, honestly, because with the baseball card I mentioned, because I don't know that baseball is as popular of a sport as it was when baseball card collecting was really big.
And card collecting, I don't think for baseball cards is not as big either, let alone the sport, like you just said.
Yeah. So, well, and because the sport isn't as big, the cards aren't as popular, right? So the fact that there was a rookie card that went for 1.1 million, I mean, obviously there are still sports aficionados out there that really place value on that kind of stuff. But, is anybody going to be another Mickey Mantle rookie card? I don't honestly know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I think in one of our episodes last year, we briefly touched on the concept of NFTs.
Mm-hmm.
Non-fungible tokens, and this idea that you could own, quote unquote, a meme that everybody already has and sees. And they got popular for like
A hot second. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you got in on that market and then you sold it a week later for 3 times the value, you made money. But in the long run, when's the last time you heard about an NFT?
You don't. Yeah. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Can't even tell you.
So I guess anyway, like I said, I think that's the thing to consider. From a financial standpoint, you want to try to make sure that what you're investing your money into, as much as you can without being able to see the future, which none of us can, you can't make assumptions about value.
Yeah.
And values change. So what might be valuable today may not be valuable later. And the Aunt Jemima bottle that you have today that is worth whatever you paid for it at Giant Eagle, honest to goodness, it might be worth something down the road because people want that touch of history,
that nostalgia,
and that nostalgia. Yeah. So.
Oh, I hope it does.
I hope it does for your sake too. Yeah. So, all right, we good?
I think that was great.
Awesome.
Thanks, Drew.